Hello folks, we're back with another video. Today we're going to be jumping into a segment I'm dubbing Jack Reviews Stuff, in honor of my horrific blog of the same name. But seeing as we're in the season of spooky, I figured I'd keep things horrific. Today we're going to talk about the second season of Netflix's The Haunting anthology, The Haunting of Bly Manor. Season 1, The Haunting of Hill House, is my favorite horror like anything ever. I hope to do a video on what makes it so great after I give it another good rewatch, but I have a lot of thoughts and feelings about Bly Manor. I'd like to preface this saying I've never read any of the books the seasons were based off of, so if there were any faults in trying to adapt them, I'm cool with that. So let's dive into what this show is about without getting into any spoilers. For those of you familiar with The Haunting of Hill House, the first thing you need to know about this second season is that it's not a continuation. Some of the actors are the same, but they're playing different characters. It's an anthology series, meaning that each season is going to be different, but the actors might remain the same. A great example of this is American Horror Story. The Haunting of Bly Manor is about an au pair, which, for those of you that don't know, is a foreign caretaker who works for room and board, which in retrospect doesn't really make sense because the first one wasn't foreign and this was just for the kids, but whatever, back on track. Au pair, hired to nanny kids, off in a manor that is obviously haunted. But it's the 80s, so I don't think that people have picked up on lone manors being obviously haunted yet, so there's no reason to be suspicious. The kids, perfectly splendid, except there's obviously some shit going down. Flora is way too proper and kind, and Miles looks like he's about ready to murder some animal in the backyard away from prying eyes. Again, 80s, so I don't think they know any better. So yeah, new nanny, haunted house, creepy children. Oh, and a lot of dolls. There's always gotta be some kind of doll because dolls are creepy as hell, and if you don't think so, you're repressing a memory so hard that you can't be a victim of their creepiness. That's just a fact. The rest of the show is about unraveling the mystery behind the manor and the many characters that inhabit it. Still continuing on as spoiler-free as possible, let's take a deep dive into those many thoughts and feelings that I had, starting with the story. There are a lot of really great things about the story and a lot of bad things about how the story was told. I was captivated by the mystery of Bly Manor, and that mystery is what stood out most about the show. Why are the children acting so weird? Why is this character acting so strange? Why is that character haunted? Why was front and center of this show? Why is what drove me to keep watching episode after episode, and I never found myself disappointed by the answers that were presented. However, in most instances, the answer was always a long one that took you away from the story you truly cared about. It was storyception, and it was not consistent. Certain episodes would be purely dedicated to answering the why, more than progressing the main story forward. Certain episodes would be entirely dedicated to unfolding the why. Certain episodes would tease the answer, tethering you back and forth between finding out why and following your main characters. It's both consistent and it lacks consistency. Bly begins with a woman telling a ghost story after a rehearsal dinner, and she's the one telling the whole story. She's the one who unveils the mysteries and interjects the answers. The main story is what's most captivating, but every time a mystery is unraveled, it's almost like a short film is being thrust into what you're really there for. When you learn of the au pair's past, when you learn of certain aspects of Bly Manor that many call home, the short film begins. If watching a show is like walking down a road from start to finish, Bly starts out with a walk, puts you in a car, makes you take the bus, a plane, a train, etc. Each one of these takes you to a destination, but you never enter a car, you never wind up at a bus or train station, an airport. You're just suddenly in a new vehicle and your path is different. I didn't like this, but it was handled with care. Bly Manor had a different director for almost every episode. Flanagan, the actual director of the first season, could have hogged the seat to himself. He could have ensured that the main story was his alone to direct, but he opened the chair up to a number of lesser-known directors. And most of these directors have an IMDb page that consists mostly of shorts. The entire show is directed well, but it lacks a seamlessness that its predecessor had truly mastered. Now, let's move on to the next part, the characters. The characters were enjoyable. Danny, the troubled au pair running from her past, an American in England, haunted by a spectacled figure. Miles, jumping between charming, innocent, and off-putting at the flip of a switch. Flora, a perfectly splendid, well-mannered young girl. Hannah, a quaint but distant woman charged with caring for the home. Owen, a charming, pun-making cook. Lastly, Jamie, a wonderfully sarcastic gardener who unsurprisingly roots the show together. Get it? Get it? 'Cause gardener? She's a gardener, And plants, they have roots. I like each and every one of these characters, but I didn't really love any of them. Most of them held great mysteries that I wanted to see unravel, but none of them were all too compelling, at least not quickly. It was very much a slow burn for them, and for the most part, altogether lacked a great deal of tension. Which is a great segue into the next bit, the horror elements. The missing tension is why I think it lost a lot of its horror potential. It's not that it wasn't scary, or there wasn't tension at all, but there are usually these two threads of tension to a horror movie. When watching a horror movie, you know something scary is about to happen. The music changes and the thread tightens. The scene quiets, tightens. The camera slows, tighter again. I call this the thread of horror. Like right now, writing this script is one I just made it up. The other thread that can tighten is that of the story or the character's tension. When you find yourself engrossed in what's happening with a story or character, it's almost like you're being drawn to the screen. You're captivated by what's going to happen next. Hill House played these threads like some two-string fiddle masterfully. Hill House was almost written in a predatory sense. The story, the characters, everything was drawing you closer and closer to the screen while the horror would be pushing you away. Drawn to watch, forced to recoil. Bly lost that sense of balance. Bly seemingly replaced that character tension with the overall mystery. Something that would get you thinking, but not something that would particularly draw you in, which I think is the greatest flaw the show had. I don't want to say Bly wasn't a scary show, because it was, but it wasn't front and center. There was this story being told, characters that developed, and mysteries that unraveled. However, that fear factor seemed to be on the back burner for most of the show, replaced with the idea of horror instead of horror itself. Ghosts and chilling moments, but nothing that would leave you particularly frightened. No "oh shit" moments, just a vibe that made you want to turn the lights on whenever you leave your room at night. If it could have managed to balance everything together, it would have rivaled its predecessor. In the end, there's something that rights the wrong, but the problem is that you have to make it to the end and get past the stumbles to really see it shine. I enjoyed Bly Manor, but I just loved Hill House, and I found myself partway through the season feeling disappointment. That this season didn't live up to the first, and then that final episode went and rectified that feeling of disappointment by altering my expectations and changing the type of scale with which to judge a show like this. You just have to make it to the end to get that justification. Ever since Hill House came out, it's been a bit of a tradition of mine to rewatch that season every October, and I've done it ever since, and I plan to continue doing that. I don't know if Bly Manor is going to be an addition to that, but I do know that I'd like to rewatch it at least one more time. I watched it the first go around knowing that I'd be making this video, and I was probably being more cynical and critical than I would have if I just let go and let the show take me on its journey. Additionally, with the knowledge you learn at the end, I think it would make rewatching an enhanced experience. Either way, I recommend this season. Even if you're in for a bit of a bumpy ride, it's still a good one. If you haven't seen Hill House, maybe watch this season first and then take the dive into the first season. You can definitely check them both out on Netflix. Alright everybody, thanks for making it this far. Video 2 is in the bag, and I have a number of scripts that are ready and raring to go. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I'd like to make another video for Hill House itself, because that season is very near and dear to my heart. I'm also working on getting an early impressions video out for a very unrelated Baldur's Gate 3. As always, your support means the world to me. Thanks for watching. Here's 2 videos. My very first, and one of me and or my buddies playing over at Cold Soup Productions.